Today I have Kai with me, who is a community pain advocate and a medical cannabis patient. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about equity in medical cannabis, and we're going to have a look at Kai's perspectives on this issue. So, first, I wanted to say hello and thank you for joining us, Kai.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And yeah, I thought you could start by telling us a little bit about your journey with medical cannabis.
Yeah, so I'll start off with my journey through disability and pain because that interlinks with my medical cannabis use. So I left school at age of 16 to become a mechanic. Used my arms a lot as I was obsessed with magic and car mechanics and
Mm.
stuff like that. And on my way to work on my motorbike on the 8th of May 2015, when I was 18 years old, I got involved in a road traffic accident. Unfortunately, caused my left arm to die. The brachial plexus that went into my spinal cord tore, meaning that my left arm is completely paralyzed and doesn't work. Over the next 4 years, I was experiencing chronic pain, and I found cannabis to help. To be honest with you, it wasn't prescribed cannabis. This would have been, street cannabis, and I found when I did use it, it had a really positive effect on my pain. However, this was, during 2017, 18, and whatnot. So, at this point, I wasn't even aware that medical cannabis was even a talking conversational point. Um, I then went in for spinal operations in 2018, 2020, and 2021, all of which caused me severe disabilities, be it neck down or waist down paralysis, as well as causing my chronic pain to become much, much worse. I was given huge amounts of gabapentinoids, huge amounts of opioids. I was given, anti-inflammatories like naproxen, all of these causing, my stomach to be turned to shreds, which they gave me more medications like a metrazole for. Um, Before, I finally was in a situation where I had my third spinal op. I was more disabled than ever. I was in more pain than ever. And they offered me not just another spinal op, but increase in medication. And at this point, I was like, I've had enough. There's obviously something that you guys have missed because the more surgeries you give me, the more drugs you give me, it's only making me worse. I'm only in more pain. I'm only becoming more disabled. So I decided to, off my own back, as I was out of university at this point, I was relearning how to walk and stuff, doing walking rehabilitation. I decided to investigate pain science myself. And along the journey of, learning about pain science, I came across a book that many people who go through chronic pain will know, Explain Pain by Lorimer Moseley and David Butler. And this, for the first time, after 8 years of spinal operations, numerous of them, nerve graft operations, a multitude of tablets, pain medications, heat patches, pain gels, the full shebang, loads of consultants, GPs, nurses, physios. After 8 years of being in the machine of the NHS, the first time I was ever told about psychosocial interventions to pain were through this book. And I was blown away because within 2 weeks of reading this book, I came off all pain medication. I started doing yoga, started doing more exercise. My life changed like that. And I was blown away. And it was only because I was actually given the utensils, which was the knowledge to understand my own pain. Um, Now, I got to a situation where, with the assistance of, street cannabis, to the point where I was on no pharmacological substances. I was only using, cannabis at night. And then I started seeing adverts and people talking, just through friends and stuff, talking about medical cannabis being legal in the UK. And obviously, with all the spinal ops and all the conditions I had, I thought, to be honest with you, a doctor would be an idiot to say I didn't deserve this because I know what I deserved, and I knew this was helping me more than anything else did. So I ended up messaging Curaleaf Clinic. They were called Sapphire Medical at the time. And I booked in for an appointment. I showed them the medical evidence, and within a few weeks, I got my first legal cannabis prescription through the door. Um, this had a profound effect on me, to be honest with you, because for the first time, I could actually tell people at work and tell people in the real world that I was using cannabis to help my condition, which I couldn't be open about. My friends and family knew before, but I couldn't be open about it because, at the end of the day, it was something illegal that I was doing. And although I didn't see it as something that was illegal, because this was the only thing that got me out of bed in the morning, this was the only thing that helped me live an okay life and gave me a quality of life, anything that I could actually sleep with and whatnot. This prescription gave me, the legal authority to say, look, I'm using this and I'm proud to use it. So I started talking about my pain journey on social media. Guided by Kai is the account. I started talking about my medical cannabis use in a series called The Chronicles. And and to be honest with you, and I've been trying to almost promote the knowledge about it, similar to how I promote the knowledge about chronic pain and it being a biopsychosocial thing through, the public health campaign Flipping Pain. I wanted to promote medical cannabis through myself and show people that, you can do a master's, you can go gym 5 days a week, you can eat healthy, think healthy, be smart, do all these things and still be a medical cannabis user. So that's the journey I'm up to now. Obviously, I very much think my medical cannabis use is less so. I think there's a misconception about my medical cannabis use. The first one being that people think when I use medical cannabis, I'm just not in pain. And that's not how chronic pain works, as many people. I've never taken a medication and it just completely take away my pain, unless it's someone giving me intravenous morphine in the hospital. And there has a lot of side effects, as you know. So the biggest misconception is that this cannabis completely eradicates my pain, and it doesn't. Cannabis I use for the psychological aspect of my pain. Pain is a biopsychosocial thing, and nociception being the biological, catastrophizing, rumination, magnification be the psychological, and isolation be the sociological, or too much workload or socioeconomic, deprivation, all influencing, your pain situation. So when I say that cannabis helps with the psychological aspect, before, I felt I was a damaged individual. I felt that this pain was never going to end. I felt that I was alone with this pain, and it felt very isolating and very scary. And I would catastrophize a lot. I would ruminate on my situation a lot, and I would magnify it. And I now use cannabis at the end of my day, not every day, but when I need it, as a way to help with the issues I have surrounding the health anxieties and whatnot. Because I found that at the end of the day, my mind likes to, as many people know, when they sit down, the mind goes crazy, especially when you go to bed, and you have chronic symptoms and whatnot. Fatigue is an issue and all that type of stuff. But even though it's an issue, it doesn't help you sleep. And so I use medical cannabis to help kind of dial down the catastrophizing so I can actually live at peace at night and I can have a good night's sleep and I can wake up refreshed in the morning, go about a day at university, go about a day at work, go to the gym, do my yoga, and help people day to day.
Okay, so that's really, really interesting. And I wanted to know if you can tell us a little bit more about sort of in the early days as you're kind of going through all of these medications and these treatment options and having to interact with all these healthcare professionals. So they've clearly seen you sort of in this state of like really extreme pain and I guess suffering a lot on your day to day because it's having clearly an impact on your daily activities and how you can function. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about sort of this transition between the way that they've seen you and their kind of attitudes towards you or the way they were with you in this time when you were really sort of, struggling with trying to get to the bottom of sort of like this pain and, the surgeries, and then afterwards as then you start to improve after you've kind of started to utilize medical cannabis for your pain. So I'm wondering if you can discuss a little bit about the transition, if there was a transition, or the sort of
Well,
attitudes that you've been seeing from healthcare professionals.
I think the transition I saw, the shift I saw was was quite literally the shift of me being perceived as a criminal and the shift of me perceived as a patient. Because I think before I got the legal cannabis prescription, I know for a fact whenever I spoke to a GP about my cannabis use, because it wasn't prescribed, the first thing was, do you need help with that? I.e., do you need referring to an addiction counselor? Do you need referring onto an addiction program? They never ever saw the cannabis before it was a legal entity as something that ever aided me, no matter how much I told them it was having a positive effect on my life, helped me use less of the really damaging pharmacological substances, helped me actually go to sleep and help my mental in a way that nothing else ever has. Even after, this is the strangest thing, even after I got the legal cannabis prescription, there was a slight shift in their ideas surrounding it, but it wasn't like they were okay with it. No, none of the healthcare professionals I've ever spoke to about my cannabis use, even after I've got this legal prescription, has never been like, okay, that's fine, that's brilliant. They've always got something to say surrounding it, i.e., it's always kind of like a either they ignore it and it's kind of like, well, if it helps you, then do you know what I mean? And and it's kind of like one of those comments, or it's, you know, or it's, I can tell there's like a preconceived notion. I can always tell the way that they're talking about it, or the way they rather don't talk about it and shy away from the conversation. It's almost like their beliefs surrounding cannabis do not align with mine in the slightest. So
So, despite seeing that difference in your symptoms and your functionality, and I guess the improvement in your health outcomes from, before when you were on this sort of like cocktail of
yeah,
various, medications versus as you're transitioning away and finding something that's more effective for you therapeutically. So, despite this, you're not having this sort of feedback or even curiosity from any healthcare
no,
professionals
no,
to want to
I,
learn
I
more.
think people, especially people in these, traditional doctors, spinal surgeons, for instance, all the,
Mm-hmm.
my spinal surgeons who have been in the job, 50, 40 years, they're veterans at this now. If I talk to them about medical cannabis, you can just see like there's no interest. It's not
Okay.
a part, they don't even want it in their lexicon. It's not there. It's just like they're like, okay, you, but I think they think that I'm deluded, that I guess I'm an addict and I'm just getting my fix. And then that really hurts sometimes because I really try more than most. And I'm not going to put all of my pain, the increases, or rather the decreases I've had in my pain, down to medical cannabis. I actively go to the gym a lot. I regulate my cortisol. I practice mindfulness every day. I do yoga every day. I do a lot psychosocially to help with my pain. And that I would say has a way more positive effect on my pain day to day than medical cannabis ever will. Cannabis for me is something that really helps with the psychological aspects of my pain, which is the catastrophizing. I have severe health anxiety. When you've been paralyzed from the neck down, you've been paralyzed from the waist down, and you've, lost arms, and you've been through the vicious cycle of the NHS of, being left in beds with no buzzers that don't work, and you're unable to control your own bowels and bladder, and you're just in these horrible situations. You get a lot of anxiety towards your health and surrounding being even near a hospital. I see PTSD as a result of having three spinal ops and all of them going wrong. I have a lot of trauma associated with that, and it would be ridiculous for someone just to think that I'm going to be able to go to bed at night and not think about all of the devastating things that have gone on. So I need something to help me through the trauma I've been through. And we know cannabis is really good for helping people with PTSD. We know cannabis is really good for helping people with chronic stress and chronic pain, because chronic stress, chronic pain, PTSD all work on the same neural networks. They're all fight or flight relevant. They're all, sympathetic nervous system. Do you know what I mean? So
Mm.
I think that for me, cannabis has been a godsend, because without it, I wouldn't have been able to attain what I've attained to this day. I genuinely believe that I wouldn't have been able to do it. I think it's a fundamental necessity for some people out there. They're experiencing, chronic pain or disability or PTSD like I do day to day. And I think that the stigmatization predominantly comes from a misunderstanding, similar to if I spoke to my spinal op and I told him, oh no, my pain is a result of a sensitive central nervous system. And I think that actually going through these spinal ops has increased my hypervigilance to threat and actually increased my pain. That spinal op surgeon's never going to admit that, because his whole belief is underpinned in the biological approach. And he's not been taught in the school of psychosocial pain. That's not his school. So he is not going to have an interest in that school, because that's me disregarding what he does. And although what he does is phenomenal, and I commend my spinal ops, I think my spinal surgeons did a fantastic job in that first operation. I just think they didn't realize they didn't need the later two. They were so caught up in their approach, which we find all the time in healthcare professionals. If you're a psychologist, you are in the echo chamber of psychology. And if you're a sociologist, you're in the echo chamber of sociology. And if you're a surgeon, you're in the echo chamber of biology. And someone speaking from a psychologist speaking to a surgeon and saying that, no, that person's pain is an amalgamation of the trauma you've put them through giving them all them ops, that he's not going to believe that, because he has been brought up in the school of nociception. He believes that pain is a physiology. He knows about the pain pathways. So this is why we need more interdisciplinary understanding and knowledge. And that's why I think there is such a stigma against me because I come from the school of psychosocial, but I've lived in the world of biological and I've seen the flaws in all of them. And I believe that, yes, cannabis isn't the be all and end all to the end of suffering, PTSD, or chronic pain. I think there's a whole multitude of, interventions that can help people day to day. But to say that I don't deserve my medical cannabis when it's had such a positive effect on my life and has changed me into a person that wants to go out and help other people day to day would be, you know, would be nullifying my experience and basically telling me that my journey isn't worth anything. And I know it is. I fundamentally know it is. And I know I can have a positive effect on people as other people's journeys have on me. If it wasn't for Lorimer Moseley talking about those people that have implemented psychosocial, that have regulated their sleep, practiced yoga, mindfulness, done these things in their daily life, changed their lifestyle, and seen differences in their pain, then I wouldn't have, adapted to that, learned from that, and learned from my mistakes. But I was brought up in the NHS for 8 years, told that I was damaged, my pain a result of injury. You know, I was told I was told
Mm.
after I just lost my arm, nerve pain is the worst pain you'll ever experience in your life. That is the ultimate priming. If you want to drip something into someone's head so they have a life of pain, that is the sentence you tell them. But this is the thing, when you've been brought up in a biological field, they don't tell you about the linguistics of pain. They don't tell you about these things, so you're not going to know to check yourself on them. And this is why we need more of that interdisciplinary connection between the different approaches.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point here about the fact that medical cannabis, especially for use in something like pain, um, it's not the be all end all, as you said. And, we're not just saying, here, have this, go away, the end. It's sort of part of taking this holistic approach to health. And I think that's more than just thinking about pain, it's about your health overall in many other ways as well that we're thinking about helping you with. So, doing the yoga, the healthy eating, the
Mm.
gym, being able to socialize, get out and about, do, you know, just those things that you need to do in life just to make you not just a basic functional human being, but like, you're living as best a life as you possibly can live. And this is a facilitator for that. It's not the only answer, it's not to be used on its own. It's part of taking this holistic type approach to sort of like health and healthcare and well-being, which I think is a really important point to make, with medical cannabis and its use. And I wonder if you can maybe talk us a little bit through then your interactions with healthcare professionals when you were getting the prescriptions and how they assessed you, and sort of like where was the change in attitude? How did you feel that? How did you feel those assessments were?
Well, initially, I'm going to be completely honest. When I first went into the first assessment, um, I wanted to act as professional and as STEM as possible. I remember wearing a shirt. I look way smarter than I look now. I remember going into it thinking, I want these people to know that I'm in the world of health.
Mm.
Because I felt that, to be honest with you, they're going to see a guy with dreadlocks turn up. They're going to see me, with the do-rag. They're going to think, here we go. That's what I believed. I thought they
Mm.
were going to be like, here's another guy just trying to get some weed on the side. Do you know what I mean? So I did want to portray myself in the light of, look, I know what helps me. I study pain. This is my job. This is what I'm studying at university. This is my world at the moment. And this is why I need it. And when I had the first appointment, with my doctor, he was very, very laid back, very understanding. Wanted to know about my journey, obviously. Wanted to know about how cannabis helped me. Wanted to know about how, when I first started using cannabis, and that type of thing. And I was honest. I told him exactly, situation. I told him, look, I've tried recreational cannabis before. It had a positive effect on my pain. It didn't have any of the negative side effects that all these pharmacological stuff did. And I thought it would be good I'd rather get a prescription of medical cannabis that I know is gonna have none of these long-term repercussions and short-term repercussions, um, and have the legal license to do so. And they were very understanding about that. Initially, the first appointment, they put me on an 18%, just strain. It was the lowest potency strain they did.
18%
And
THC.
18%
Yeah.
THC, I should add, not CBD. Um,
But there
and
is still CBD obviously in it.
you
It's
can get the
just,
CBD alternatives,
yeah.
but I have found that the CBD at these clinics is so expensive. And given that I
Okay.
think CBD is getting popularized elsewhere, although they're selling it as a tea as opposed to selling it as like a, a vaporizable or smokable thing. And, around the UK, I've noticed it's always sold as like a tea, which is very weird. But from these clinics, it is very expensive for what it is, and the
Mm.
quality is not anything that I would get if I was to order it online or whatnot. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think after the first appointment, I told him that I don't think the potency was anything near what my tolerance was used to. We increased the potency up to 22%, and I was having strains around 22% to 24% THC, and that was doing me fine, to be honest with you. And obviously, the more I started, using the prescription, because I found it was having a positive effect at night, I started using it most nights, to be honest with you. And then I started realizing I need to implement more breaks, because if I just keep going up the percentage, it's going to get to the point where it's not going to have the desired
Any
effect that
effect.
it does. So I implement, cannabis detoxes and stuff like that.
And that
Um,
was you yourself rather than like having the follow-ups or guidance from the clinicians.
how was I myself?
No, as in you yourself wanted to implement the
Yeah,
breaks
I at no
rather than
point.
being told by clinicians that this is useful for you as part of your therapy and maintaining efficacy.
Yeah, I went into all of these appointments with a pre-existing understanding about my own cannabis use, about cannabis as a substance, as a drug. Um, and I've done diplomas in psychopharmacology, where one of the modules was cannabis. So I have a somewhat a good, more so than the general public, understanding of cannabis. And I think they knew that from the get-go. And I've
Mm,
noticed that at no point were they trying to. I never felt like I was being guided or taught. I always felt
okay.
like I knew what I wanted, and I knew, I know my pain. I know me more than anyone. I know no one's ever going to know me the way I know me. So I go into each appointment telling them my situation, telling them what I want out of it, and 100% of the time, everything I've asked for, I've gotten.
So then where do you see the support coming from the clinicians? Do you feel that maybe there was some gaps in knowledge or parts where it was more of sort of like this bi-directional learning where you're having to sort of, work with them as well based on your prior understanding and knowledge and their knowledge? I'm just trying to understand if there's like an imbalance, you think, in knowledge between yourself and the clinicians prescribing, or if it's sort of like a give and take along the way.
I never got the idea that they didn't know what they were talking about,
Okay,
but
yeah.
I never asked them questions because I thought I knew the answers. So
Okay.
that might have been a boo-boo on my part. But it was one of those where I knew what I wanted. I know what helps me. I told them that, I speak quite eloquently. They can tell I work in health. They know my background, and I think they were more than willing to go, this guy knows his stuff. I'm gonna prescribe him what he feels he needs. Now, even if I told him, I'm like, I did get some big nasty medical, and it was strong. It was way stronger than that was
Mm,
used to. And I told him that, and I was like, I don't think I need that strong medical, cannabis at the moment. I think I can go down a grade, because it was like, I don't need it, I don't want to increase my tolerance to the point where it's so high and I'm just paying more for the same desired effect. That doesn't make any sense to me. And plus the negative psychological, effects of it, you do feel less motivated. It does induce a lot of lethargicness the next day, that type of thing. I mean, compared to pharmaceutical stuff, nowhere near, but nothing's perfect, and that should be set in stone. There's never going to be a chronic pain cure that fits everyone and is perfect. It doesn't work like that. It's such an individualistic experience. The intervention needs to be an individualistic thing. Do you know what I mean? And that brings me on to my next point surrounding medical cannabis. There's a lot of people it's going to make their pain worse. There's a lot of
mhm,
people that are hypervigilant. They are very high anxiety. They are neurotic in their personality type, the higher neuroticism, and they've never probably tried medical cannabis before. And someone's telling them, "Oh my God, it's having the best effect on my pain in the world." They try it and they're sitting there paranoid, not knowing what's going on. You see it with your friends when they do recreational, cannabis. Some people don't react like other people react. Just like with alcohol, just like with diazepam, just like with opioids. It's a very, you know what I mean? There's these things aren't universally true, and they're not going to have a universal, beautiful impact. So that needs to be noted as well. It has a very positive impact on me, and it has always had a very positive impact on me. The negative impacts are very small as well for me, and I am quite psychologically strong. So whenever I get the feeling like, oh, do you know what, I'm using a lot of this medical cannabis, I can tell myself, No, I need to get on top of this because financially it's not responsible, psychologically it's not responsible, and at the end of the day, it's just going to demotivate me more and whatnot. So I think a lot of my journey of medical cannabis has been a self-disciplined journey. I have given myself the know-how. I have experimented with myself. I do little RCTs. Some weeks I'll do CBD. Some weeks I'll do, these little games I play with myself to see what works best, for when. And there are periods in my life where I've relied heavily on medical cannabis because I've been extremely stressed, meaning my pain is a lot heightened because, as again, it is fight or flight. They're the same mechanisms. And I've had to rely more on that medical cannabis use. And those times, I've not been like, oh, do you know what? I'm using a lot of medical cannabis at the moment. I've been like, I need to use a lot of medical cannabis at the moment because I know me. And I think this is where chronic pain becomes less of a passive recipient thing and more of an active participant thing. You can't be a chronic pain patient and have no idea what's going on. You do need to take responsibility and learn about your DIMS and your SIMs, as Lorimer Moseley would put it, and learn about your triggers and learn.
Wait, so can you just explain what the dims and sims are for our
Dims and
audience?
Sims are I might have gotten this the wrong way here. So in essence, Dims and Sims are the things that have a positive effect on your pain and the things that have a negative effect on your pain. So, for instance, a lot of people when you have chronic pain say rest is good. But if you're always in bed, you will find your pain is going to go absolutely crazy. I found this. I thought movement was causing, I had kinesiophobia. I thought movement was making my pain worse. So I would always be resting. And then when I would go to move, my body would be so not used to movement, it would see that as a threat and I would get in pain. So you have to recondition your central nervous system to learn that movement is good. So exercise is a positive thing for my pain, although it does induce a bit of short-term pain afterwards. Throughout the rest of the week, that regulation in cortisol, that movement, and that understanding that I can move and it's not going to harm me has been incredibly beneficial. So that's a positive thing for my pain. Um, so I think that, understanding yourself is critical in this journey. And if you are the type of person that wants to use medical cannabis, I think that yes, there is a duty of care from the prescriber, but there is also a duty of care from yourself to make sure you're going into this with the right know-how and the right knowledge. Now, this is where the issue comes. People don't, there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with pain and they want to use medical cannabis and they don't speak great English. There's a lot of people who, have, they're not the best academically, so they can't look up pain science or the pharmacology of cannabis. So we do need to make knowledge more accessible, and that only comes with conversations like these. Do you know what I mean? Because there's going to be people watching this that might not understand pharmacokinetics or pharmacodynamics, but they do understand that their body's gonna work with the drug in a certain way, and the drug's gonna work with their body in a certain way. So it's about linguistics a lot of the time and making sure that this knowledge is accessible. And that's where public health really comes in. Because as someone that works for a public health campaign, it's a responsibility to make sure that I'm not speaking all this jargon all the time, that I can dumb it down and you can go, do you know what? This is plain and simple. I sit at bed sometimes, I go to bed sometimes at night and I think, oh my God, I've had a really hard day. It's been really stressful. My body's in a bit more fight or flight than normal. I'm a bit more hypervigilant. And those small things that don't normally cause me, you know, to not go to bed or cause me stress or cause me anguish, they're a lot more heightened. So I then go, okay, I'm heightened to this threat. I'm heightened to my mind at the moment. My mind won't stop. What can I do in this situation? I can do one of three things. I can use medical cannabis. I can induce, do some yoga because it's a good movement, but it helps with the somatic movement, but also calms the mind. Or I can do some mindfulness, or I can do all three and have a really good night's sleep. And traditionally, that's what I do. I don't just depend on the cannabis. I don't just depend on the mindfulness. I don't just depend on the yoga. I use an amalgamation because I know it's the best thing for my mind, body, and soul, and it's gonna help me the most. So it's a self-discovery, and it is. I'm constantly learning. At one point I did, if you had this meeting with me a few years ago, I would have told you cannabis is the number one thing. It is the best thing in the world. Oh my God, it is incredible. There is nothing like it. And I will say that. I also will say it with a pinch of salt. You need it with a holistic routine of care.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think do you think the clinics supported you, or what was sort of their approach? Do you think they encouraged you for this holistic care, or they were just mostly focused on the prescribing element?
Oh, I don't think they cared in the world. I mean, at the end of the day, they're making money. I don't think any of these clinics care about me doing yoga. I think that's a lie. I think there at the end of the day, there's people who work for these clinics and they're individuals and they're doctors and they are compassionate and they are caring. I've spoke to some incredible doctors who have been interested in my life and whatnot. But at the end of that call, they're going on to a next call, and their duty of care is surrounding cannabis use. It's not surrounding me going to the gym. It's not surrounding me doing, any mindfulness or anything like that. So I think this is where I step back to that whole interdisciplinary, like role. We need more connections. We are
Yeah.
such a society of compartmentalization, especially when it comes to academia. You are either a psychologist or a nurse, it's like, well, no, because a nurse is a psychologist. When you're in hospital and you're in that bed for 4 weeks, that woman and that man next to your bed becomes the best psychologist you'll ever meet and is helping you through times that most psychologists will never even see in their life. So they are a psychologist. They're just not qualified for it. And this is where the limitations come, and this is where the fundamental holes in the NHS are made. Because if you qualify someone as a carer, as a nurse, and they're not qualified for that role, they're only qualified for the biological aspect of that role, you're going to see a psychological and sociological deprivation in that individual. They're going to be deprived. They're going to be more in fight or flight, to the extent where you can send someone in for a pain operation for endometriosis and they will come out and they'll be in way more pain and experience way more endometriosis because you have just put them through 4 weeks of fight or flight of hell on earth, of screaming, of turmoil, not being able to go to the toilet in peace, of not being able to turn on the light on and off whenever it's up to you, of being in a really hot wing. You've created an environment that isn't for, creating good health. There's no nutrition in a hospital. It's prison food. I was there. I couldn't even eat half it. Some of it I looked at and I was like, how do they expect me to heal off this? Like, how? Do you know what I mean? So this is where the holistic care really comes in, and it sounds alternative health, but I hate that term because what? Alternative to what? The crap we're in right now. Is that what it is? Is that the alternative that we're talking about? Because if that's the alternative, I will jump on that ship till I die if that's the alternative. Because I've been in the hospitals where I've had no buzzers and I'm crapping myself and they've not given a care in the world because it's a biological institution. I am not a biological man. Well, I am. I'm also a holistic biopsychosocial man. I am Kai. I am not a, brachial plexus or herniated spinal cord, as they called me. I am Kai da Costa. Treat me as Kai da Costa. Do not treat me as this, biological entity and expect me to heal. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, so I think you really touch upon some of the broader challenges we experience in the NHS, especially I guess in secondary care. And there's equally just as many challenges like working in primary care, working in the community. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit more, sort of like with your advocacy work and other patients, and like some of the experiences they've gone through in terms of them potentially accessing this as a medicine. Has it worked? Have they faced challenges? What are you seeing in your work?
Every person I speak to in pain asks me about medical cannabis.
Okay.
Every single person. As soon as they're aware of my medical cannabis use, every single one is, how does it help? How easy is it to get? And do you think it will help me? They're the three questions I get. And I can answer two of those, unfortunately. The last one, I haven't got a chance at answering because that is completely up to the individual. It's a trial and error method, unfortunately. And that's the craziest thing is it costs so much and it's so hard to get the initial appointment. When you finally get there and you find out it doesn't work for you, that is the biggest kick in the teeth in the world. So there needs to be, more an easier accessible line to trying it and to see if it works through a legal means. Because the fact that the only reason I knew it worked for me was through a legal means is ridiculous. But that's the only option you get in this country. There's no, do you know what I mean? It's how much is the first appointment? I think the first appointment was £50, maybe £100 for the first consultation. And then after that, you have not just to pay for every other follow-up meeting, but you also need to pay however expensive the cannabis prescription is, varying from like £5.50 up to, £10.50 a gram. And then yeah, and it's just that's a lot of money for a lot of people. I mean, when I first got my cannabis prescription, I'm a student, working part-time jobs. I'm on benefits, universal credit because of my disabilities and whatnot. So do you know what I mean? It's not. I
So
knew
how
it
much sort
worked
of was it costing? What kind of numbers are we looking at?
each month.
Yeah, just roughly like how
About I would
was it?
say it was similar to my rent, so it'd be around £500 to £600 a month.
So I think that's quite a lot for
Oh, it's.
people to
I mean,
try, and access this.
very much. And now, and that would be a prescription of 2 gram a day, was what I
Mm,
was on to, I've gone down from that. But I was on 2 gram a day when I was, and that was when I was at university. I think all the stresses and that made my cannabis use go up for sure. Um, but yeah, for me, it got to a point where I was like, this is financially irresponsible. Although I feel like I need this, I can't afford this. This is ridiculous. And it's a real kick in the teeth as well when you're seeing these huge prices from a clinic, but Bob down the road will send you a message and you're like, how much? Why am I paying this much? Like, this is a plant at the end of it. What other plant can you charge this much for? There is no plant on earth that costs this much. It is, it's insane to think that, well, I think saffron's the only thing that competes for it, surely. Like, it's, and I think that's also, a big barrier to access is that you need to be financially independent and have a decent amount of disposable income to get a kind of subscription, and even then
yeah.
you're going to struggle like I do.
And I think it's still a compartmentalized approach if you're exclusively going to a clinic just for one medication rather than, you know, for example, if it was through your primary care clinician, and in an ideal world, GPs will have more time to look at a patient. We would have more time to be able to have that continuity of care and be able to see the same people progress, and be able to see the full picture because I think this day and age, most people don't just have one condition. We have multiple
Yeah,
things going
comorbidities.
on with this. And there's lots of other medication that I'm considering. And I think for yourself, you're very proactive. You clearly had an extremely difficult time with the extent of the pain, to the point of having 3 spinal surgeries, which is very, very intense to have to go through. But you've been extremely motivated to kind of almost, it sounds like, turn your life around, and really sort of take agency over what's going on and sort of not let this neurological issue define you and sort of let overcome a lot of these sort of, I guess, some of these preconceptions that okay, you're basically, this is your lot in life and you have to accept it. And I think
Yeah.
you've come from a very nice position because you've been able to become very active. You work quite robustly in the community. You're advocating for this, and there's a certain amount of privilege, which means you even get to access this, which I think is excellent. But again, it shouldn't. I almost feel like it's so much to have to ask patients to do. And I think a lot of patients, what if they don't have that support? They don't necessarily have that literacy rate.
Yeah.
They don't have all the extra means to even think about things like nutrition or yoga or accessing higher education or some of these other things, because I know especially things like chronic pain are extremely prevalent in more marginalized communities. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit more about, maybe some of those patients that you're talking to that are thinking about this and thinking, oh, but maybe private's too expensive, and they're kind of forced to have to maybe engage with an illicit economy, whereas maybe they would prefer to, have a clinician who maybe can guide them a little bit more.
Mm.
I just wonder if you can speak a little bit more about those experiences.
Well, I think fundamentally, the reason I have gotten to this situation has because I have been very assertive with all of the healthcare professionals in my life. I, and you are a healthcare professional, so I don't mean any disrespect when I say this, but prior to me gaining understanding about my pain and gaining, somewhat, a decent understanding of my own health and well-being and just health in general, I believed every doctor I spoke to, every physio, every person who I ran into had my best interest at heart. I believed that wholeheartedly. I can tell you right now that was completely wrong. They did not have my best interest at heart. They had their own interests in front of they only saw what they could see. And I think that this is where the limitations arise. I now know when someone tells me, "Oh, you need an operation," I ask them the right questions. I'm very critical now towards operations. I'm very critical towards medications. I'm very critical towards most things now because I know I need to look at things critically because before I did that, I got paralyzed 3 times as a result of the constant operations I was being put through. Now, I would love to tell people that they should go seek guidance from, their GP, their surgeon, their psychologist or whatnot, because that's what they're paid to do. But I have not taken any guidance from any of these people. Every bit of guidance I've had has put me in a worse situation. I took my own guidance. I studied myself and I learnt myself. For me to then say, what do they do in that situation? I can't help them there. All I can do is promote what I promote on my social media and tell people what I've been through. That's all I can do and hope that some people listen and some people apply it to their life. Because unfortunately, I would love to say I'm going to signpost you here or signpost you here. Yeah, yeah. If you're struggling with chronic pain and you've exhausted all surgeries and pharmacological things, and you are in a you're in a situation where like someone's saying, "Look, I need this operation. I don't know what to do." I'll signpost you to Flipping Pain because they've helped me massively and I work with them and I know they do really good work. But if someone's asking me about medical cannabis, I can't sign them to Flipping Pain. I can't tell them to go speak to their GP because when I spoke to my GP, they looked at me like, medical cannabis? I didn't
Mm.
even know it was illegal. I didn't even
Yeah.
know it was legal rather. So it's like it's a real, it's a not I can't answer that question of what they can do in that situation. I have not got that answer. I know where the answer lies, and it lies in the reduction of stigmatization, in the increased access to medical cannabis, both financial access, but also, just being able to talk about it and not be judged. That would be lovely. That would be lovely to be able to, speak about it at a conference and not have people do the whole, because I know I look a certain way and I know I speak in a certain way, but it's no bearing on my cannabis use. You know what I mean? Like I just, me being able to walk, me being able to sleep, me being able to go and carry out a day-to-day life is a representation of my cannabis use. But, to most people, cannabis is this, it's got old traditions associated to it, of a hippie dude sitting there eating Doritos watching a film or gangster rap or all these things, and and I think that they shouldn't be shied upon. I think we should embrace a lot of those ideas because there's a reason that these cultures have used cultures that traditionally have used these things have been cultures that have been stressed out, have been trying to relax, have been trying to get through the turmoils that they've been put through. And I think that why why should that be disregarded? Why should that be seen as something that's terrible? That people from poor areas use cannabis. It's like, yeah, well, they also go through increased chronic pain. They also go through increased, lack of literacy, and they go through all of these, you know, comorbidities and issues that, most people at the heights of life will never see. But they're
Mm.
the ones judging. And I think that's kind of like it's a very so it feels so unfair to me. Of course, I mean, it's a lack of understanding and a lack of fairness at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that, it really does kind of, it's the cognitive dissonance almost that can happen, isn't it, in this
You
space?
summed it up perfectly there.
Yeah. So I wonder about sort of like moving forward, like what do you see the future of sort of medical cannabis? What do you think in an ideal world where we're going towards in the UK, and how do you think we can get there?
I think the future, I can't tell you where we're going. I can tell you where we'd like to go, where I would like
Yeah,
us to
tell me
go.
tell me in your ideal
Yeah,
situation.
ideal situation. I would love to. I don't think regulating cannabis how it's been regulated is the best way to. I think private clinics are just there to make money. They're not there out for the people. I truly believe that. I think if the best drug reform we could have in this country would be decriminalization and having people grow their own. And if you can't, if you're not able to grow your own, someone can grow for you. Do you know what I mean? I think that there's in a perfect world, I think that everyone should be able to grow as much cannabis as they need to grow for themselves. And if they're in a situation where they can't, they can get someone else to grow it for them. Beautiful, no third party. You know what's involved in it. You know what's involved in the growth, the creation, and it's also a very therapeutic process, I imagine, to grow cannabis. I imagine, do you know what I mean? Like the way I've got all my plants around my house, looking after them. It's so a good way of explaining yoga or explaining mindfulness is this idea of having a relationship with yourself, having this non-confrontational, beautiful relationship with yourself. You can have that with a plant. Whenever I'm struggling, sometimes I'll do some plant care. I have plants all over my house. I'll, do some plant care in the garden. It's a very therapeutic, beautiful experience that will help with your pain. It will help with your pain. So imagine cultivating cannabis plants, growing those cannabis plants, and choosing your method, be it smoking, be it inhalation, be it edibles, whatever you choose, because it's your body and it's your right and it's your freedom and it's your choice. I think that should be the ideal future of cannabis. Getting there is going to be very difficult because you have huge industries making a lot of money off of people suffering in this country. And that's not just cannabis. That is the whole medical health sphere in this country. At the end of the day, people are making money. So people want to continue making money. So the idea of these industries being open to the decriminalization or the easier access of legalization so people can start their own clinics is going to be it's going to be difficult because they want a monopoly. Do you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, that's feeding their pocket. So ideally, yeah, I love there to be free access to everyone from every walk of life. I think that it doesn't have to be medical. We know from books like Drugs Without the Hot Air with Professor Nutt that cannabis is 114 times safer than, alcohol. We know that alcohol has huge negative effects on the population, yet every street corner has it. Why can't we do that with cannabis that has such positive effects on people's physical and mental well-being?
The main thing really is improving access, making
Yes.
sure that also that I think, this growing your own is an interesting idea, especially when we're thinking about like accessibility and sort of more community-led initiatives
Yeah.
as well, and community building aspects of this. So thinking about it more from like a public health aspect, I guess. But obviously we would still need, you know, the type of facilities to grow, very specific, consistent medicinal product for those that would need it in that form and would need some consistency. So I think it's more about what sort of options we have, how diverse is the landscape for this. And I think at the moment it's quite exclusive. It's quite, it's not diverse at all, basically. And I think even entering that space, and even I guess kind of discussing some of these ideas or exploring some of these ideas that you're talking about can be quite challenging and in and of itself face stigma, where I think it's probably worth us being able to take a step back and, really think, okay, what are the pros and cons of all of this? How much harm is really going to come out of this? Can
Yeah.
if you take out the politics a little bit and actually just more objectively look at genuinely the harms and genuinely the benefits of this, rather than everything's automatically harmful by default. I think we need to get out of this it's harmful by default kind of mindset and just recognize there's a lot more complexity and nuance to this.
Well, definitely. And this is the thing. You're going to have people that have really negative psychological effects to cannabis. People have predispositions to psychosis and they use cannabis and induces that psychosis. No doubt. But should we criminalize that individual for trying that cannabis?
Mhm.
No, we should make sure that they're in the safest environment possible where they're trying it, making sure they're given the safest plant, which means it's not been produced in some booky place and sprayed with all types of stuff. It's got some level of regulation behind it. And unless you're growing it for yourself, which I think you should be able to do what you want, to be honest with you, in this ideal world. I think if someone's selling it and then there needs to be regulation. If there's a mass conglomerate selling this stuff, there needs to be consistency and regulation for sure if it's sold as a certain medicine at a certain potency and whatnot. Um, but yeah, I think that it's a complex issue, and I don't have all the answers in any way. I don't even think I have a few answers. I have my own answers, and I have my own life, and I have my own pain, and I know what works for me. And cannabis has been a godsend. Is it going to be a godsend for you? I have no idea. Is it going to be a future where cannabis is going to be in a free market and anyone can have access? I have no idea. I'm just in a situation now where I've gotten a cannabis prescription after wanting one for after nearly 8 years, nearly a decade now of suffering, of really bad chronic pain. I've got a cannabis prescription that says I am legally entitled to this drug, and I want to preach that it has a positive effect on me. And yeah, that's what I've got to say.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Kai. And I wonder if you have any final thoughts or comments maybe you wanted to share with like the health community.
Um, Take yourself out of your own shoes. Because as much as you think you know that person in that situation, as much as you think you know about their pain or you think you know about their struggle, you have no idea. You have no idea what someone's gone through. And I think that it's really important to understand that your limitations lie in the fact that you can't live their experience. So stop pretending that you can and you know their experience because you don't. Trust people know themselves more than you think. And if they don't, you need to give them the know-how how to know themselves. You need to provide them with the knowledge. You need to signpost them to the right places so they can learn more about their condition or themselves. If you're telling them what to do and you're not having this reciprocal relationship with your patients, you're not a doctor. A doctor helps, a doctor guides, but a doctor does so with the right information and the right knowledge. So use the right information and right knowledge. Speak to them. Don't just read a book.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for joining us today, Kai. And yeah, so hopefully we will get to hear from you another time as well in the future.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.